Good news, though. Good news. Good news. I have some excellent news.
George doesn't look like he's enthralled with your good news. George, that's not an anticipatory good news face. A bit more, George. A bit more enthusiasm.
Well, it's good news. I disconnected at that point.
You just need to smile.
I haven't said what the good news is. I'm really kind of building it up. I'm really building it up. No, the good news is I've actually got something to present. Like, I've actually thought of something. You know how Jamie's now having to step in for me because I didn't have a thing.
Oh,
I've actually got one.
Right,
I think I've got one.
We'll do your thing then.
No.
Through the preliminaries, the introductions and the niceties, really. We need to introduce with beer.
Absolutely.
I'm scraping the bottom of the fridge today.
Yeah.
So I've got a bottle of Coors that I found, and I've got some of these little cans of Peroni.
Look at that, man.
Look cute, aren't they? I think the vegan Peronis.
Get away. Such a thing can't exist. Surely not.
I think they're my daughters, to be fair.
All right, okay. So
they could be. I don't know. It doesn't say anything about being vegan, or she's just told us to make us look like an idiot, which is easy done.
Well,
George, I've seen some Ghost Ship. Is that what you got?
Ghost Ship, aye, well spotted, Jamie.
Good
Adnams Brewery, down in Southwold, Suffolk.
From Aldi.
No, I don't know if they sell it in Aldi. They might sell a version in Aldi. They might do, I don't know.
Okay. And Stephen?
I have a Shapeshifter West Coast IPA from the Four Purple Brewing Company. Brewed and canned in London. Get on to them. They might now send us some free ones.
Yeah, this is totally what's going to happen now.
Creates of it. Absolutely creates of it.
I was just wanting to check what our numbers were up to.
In the millions there.
Wittgenstein's Lion has had 72,000. No, 72. Just 72. 72 views. And Des Cartier's Barrel of Apples has only had 45. That's disappointing.
Well,
there you go.
I need to step aside for George.
We're going to get 100 in a week this time, though, Jamie, aren't we?
Plato's Cave. Plato was a philosopher in ancient Greece. A lot of his writings were kind of influenced because of whether the times he was living in, and his teacher was Socrates. And Socrates was tried by the people of Athens in a democratic vote, and he was voted as being guilty of corrupting the young. And so his punishment was he could choose, but he chose hemlock. And Plato was quite angry about this, and he felt that was down to a degeneration of the state. He had this theory of thought of forms. He felt that everything was perfect initially, and then gradually things have degenerated into what that don't resemble what they originally once looked like. So there's a perfect horse, there's a perfect bed, and then there's been copies since. But you also apply that to the state. He felt that was a perfect state created by God, or the gods, and he had a historicist view that the state was deteriorating. So he wrote a book called The Republic, and that was his effort to address that, to address this deterioration of the state and to create a state that wouldn't deteriorate, that was perfect. So it was quite a closed state. People had rules and stuff like that, and religion was put in place to control the masses. It was a false religion. It was placed upon them for control measures. Anyway, so he was talking about how people's minds work, and he come up with a story in the book called The Cave. Take me time to get to this point. I'm getting there.
We're hanging on every word. We're absolutely we're in the palm of your hand here.
It's in there. So we'll have the cave. And what Plato said, he says, imagine this, okay? He says you've got a bunch of people living in the cave and they're in chains, okay? They can't turn their heads round because they're fixed. The hands are like down, so they can't actually do anything. He didn't explain how they go to the toilet or how they eat or how they do any of these things, but let's just imagine that they can't do a thing. So all they see is this cave wall. And on this cave wall, all they see is shadows. So there's people behind them creating the shadows. These shadow masters are creating the shadows. But if all they can see for all their life is these shadows, that's their reality. Okay? So there's so they have no other concept about life. Their shadows are real. So these cave dwellers become quite sophisticated in how they interpret the shadows, and I think they're quite clever about it. And they might sing songs, write poetry on, and that type of thing about these shadows, which they see as real because they've got no other point of view. They can't challenge that because they've got nothing to think about. I mean, this is real. This is what this means. And they would have some debates about all that. So then we'll have one man escapes his chains, and he manages to leave the cave. And he gets out. He's quite blinded by the sun, and he's like, at first he's like really overwhelmed by it. And then, gradually his vision returns and he starts seeing things. So he starts seeing the reality of things. So, I talk about the forms, which is much more, I think that's what Plato's trying to get at. He's actually seeing a tree rather than the shadow of a tree. And you can see the depth of that tree. And then you could see the sunlight when his eyes just look, you see the sunlight and you think, wow, this is what the world is. Not my vision on the cave wall. That's not what the world is. This is what the world is. This is reality, not that. So he spends some time exploring the world, and then he goes, I've got to go back. I've got to tell my mates what's real. So he sets off on his mission to go and educate his mates and give them enlightenment and say, you've been living this lie. These shadows on the walls aren't real. So he gets back in the cave, and because he's not used to being in the cave anymore, he's not used to being in the dark, he's used to being out in the sunlight, he stumbles around. He doesn't fit in anymore. Pardon me. So then he tells his mates, look at what you're seeing is wrong. We need to get out of here. That's the light. This is the truth. Not this. What you're seeing is not the truth. But then they were like, no, all I see is somebody who doesn't fit in and is stumbling around. You don't understand what we're saying anymore. So they kill him, which is quite brutal. And to this day, he's still dead. So the man who was liberated came back and was killed. So that's the allegory. Is that allegory? Is that the correct term? Of the cave. And so how does this fit in with social work? Because I think you could take this on a few different levels. We could sit here and discuss how Plato had the foresight in seeing how easily we could be manipulated as human beings, and are the shadows in the cave the same as the screens on our phones or the screens on our TVs, and we're just kind of looking at the shadows and think we're right. And then when somebody kind of checks that out and has to look elsewhere, we disprove them to know you're mad, you're an idiot, and all this kind of stuff, and you get discredited and almost killed by by if you don't agree with what we say, that's the way you're not welcome anymore. However, for today, I think the important thing to look at is this: how does this fit in with social education, and are we by teaching new social workers or student social workers about law and theory and all them other things that go along with that to become social workers? I want to take them away from the shadows that they may perceive and show them the light. And is that not a difficult journey? Because I remember mine. I remember feeling, when I was doing my training, that suddenly I just switched the light on and I was seeing the world in a depth that I hadn't seen before. I certainly felt that way. But then when you start talking to people, and they sometimes say they might reject you, see you brainwashed by the likes of me and Stephen. When they're not, it's really just the free thinkers now. That's the journey that they're on. So, how do we support somebody who is going through that journey of not just looking at the shadows, but looking at some great depth? Okay, so that's, I think, what we should talk today. Now, I'm going to give you a minute. This is just for Stephen's special effects. Thought I'd done it. So, this is some facts. Plato, as I mentioned before, was a pupil of Socrates, and he was also the teacher of Aristotle. Some great minds there. Plato formed the first ever university in Athens. So our jobs are down to Plato. And an interesting fact, which links him to the northeast of England, as George did with Wittgenstein, is he actually worked on the docks right outside St. Peter's campus, where we work as a labourer. As a labourer.
That's brilliant.
And he built the QE2 right there.
No way.
I think.
Wait a minute, I'm not finished, Josh. He also invented the straight radiator.
That is better. That's the most popular one.
And he went to school with Donald Trump.
No way.
I've got some photos, I'll send them on.
Incredible.
I was just going to say, I think the university fact, I think it's lasted, obviously it doesn't exist now, but it lasted longer than any education institution. I think it might be 1,200 years.
Yeah.
It lasted longer than Oxford, sort of thing.
I can feel a special effect coming in with that information coming down now.
It could do. It's just whenever anybody talks about Socrates, there's a contemporary link here. I'm always reminded of that famous film, of which there is about to be a new one. So there's going to be a new Bill and Ted's Adventure, isn't there? There's going to be a new Bill and Ted's film. So will we get a Socrates reference into the Bill and Ted's film?
Oh, I heard it's absolutely pants.
Oh, well,
subjective.
It will be, I'd imagine. What is it? The third one in. It's never going to be as good as the first one, is it? But yeah.
The Bill and Ted link, Keanu Reeves, Matrix, isn't it? Matrix is very much the case, isn't it?
Absolutely. And
George.
And Plato was Keanu Reeves' uncle.
I heard that.
Had you heard that?
I heard that.
But actually, that leads me into a slightly more serious conversation, which I think is what this is getting at, isn't it? Which is, how do we know what's true? How do we know what the reality of things is? You know what I mean? So you've given some rather spurious facts about Plato being a doctor or related to Keanu Reeves there. So how do people know that's true? And one thing that struck me today when we were teaching was I put a quote up on the screen from Matthew Walker, who's written a book on sleep, and I read this quote out, and it's quite a damning quote about kind of the physical effect of lack of sleep. And one of the students, and rightly so, I didn't have a problem with the question at all, and I think it was a very healthy thing to say, really. She said, "Has he got any proof for that?" I thought, fair enough, you know what I mean? And my response was, well, yes, he has. He's researched sleep like all his work and life. But it got me to think, when I was at university, well, New College, Durham, because I didn't scale the dizzy heights of university status. When I was at New College, Durham, it would never have crossed my mind that a lecturer in a university quoting somebody from a book would ever do that without it being factually accurate. And I was thinking about this afterwards. I was thinking, is that the point we've got to, where actually all people are ever seeing are the shadows on the walls? And but I've got the point now where we've got no idea what's true and what's not true anymore, to the point where people would question. I'm not trying to sound like elitist or whatever here. Would question a lecturer in a university quoting someone from a book. It's like, well, is that factual? Is that where we've got to? Because we're now so used to questioning people who present things to us as facts.
And spin that on its head. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing?
I applaud her. I applaud her for asking the question. That wasn't that and I think we should question all of these facts we're presented with. Where does the role of kind of expert fit in that, without going too far away from the Plato's Cave thing? Where does the role of expert fit in that? You've got all the climate change deniers and all these kind of people. So, people are now see experts as actually people who are getting in the way of things rather than people who are. And the whole COVID thing, we're not following the science apparently, but people are reluctant to want to accept the guidance and advice of people who are the ones who probably are best placed to give that. But is that not because over the years we've heard so many things? Caffeine gives you cancer. Caffeine's really good for you before a run. Caffeine does this. Caffeine does that. The point now, people just don't know. And actually, researchers and scientists play into that game anyway. So we just don't know what the reality is of a situation. We just know what the reality is right now in this minute, or what we're being told.
Yeah, it's a bit existentialism again. But I think me and George have had this conversation before, haven't we, George? When the whole Brexit debate happened, we were saying, I remember we discussing this and saying, well, how do we know? How do we know what we know? Because you can lay criticism. I was discussing this today about close thinking, and so we could lay criticism toward those people who were strong Brexit yes, because we're listening to just one side of the argument, and they weren't listening to the rest of the argument. But the question that we kind of posed to each other at the time was, well, how are we so different? I was reading arguments to support Brexit. I was reading the one that didn't. So then I was asking the question, where do we get our information from? So is our resources any better than theirs? And so how do you have that unless you're really interested in something and we're studying it, from on an academic level where we look at both sides of the argument and we'll try to trade it all together. But you don't do that in real life. So I think in university we do, but in real life I think we're just really what we're interested in, don't we? And thinking, well, that supports my views, I'm going to continue on with it. And do it. Should we be really challenging ourselves in life and looking at different aspects, looking at what's this man who's just went out the cave and come back and said, because sometimes that's what it is, isn't it? So somebody came to me and said, I believe the Earth's flat. I would laugh at them. I genuinely would think, God, you're an idiot. But then why? He's got something to say. I should listen to that and kind of bring it into my own thought processes and think, let's weigh it up, let's weigh up the evidence. But the point, what you're meaning, Stephen, is how do we do that? Where do we get our information from? And how do we know it's right compared to their information? So I think it's really difficult. So could we be in Plato's cave and somebody said, the world's round, and we're watching the shadow on the wall that the world's round? It's just the same, isn't it? And then we'll have some people who left the cave and come back and say it's flat. I mean, just a disclaimer here, I don't believe for a moment that it's flat. But that's the question is, how do you know? And we'll go back to the first podcast we did on existentialism, is what Descartes said I get his name right now, what Descartes says about I think therefore I am. So the only thing we can actually really know is that I'm having this thought process at this moment in time. I don't even know I've existed for 47 years. I might have been programmed to think that. So the only thing we know is that we're having this thought process, and everything else will kind of make our own way around with that. So we've got that thought, but what do we do with it? Because it leaves you in a position thinking, I know nothing. Because especially now, because you can pick up your iPhone and it'll tell you loads of information, and you think, well, that seems right. That's from a reliable source. But there's a counter argument from another reliable source, and you think, well, I don't know anymore. You've got to use your rationale to kind of come up with something. Well, I don't know the answer.
I mean, to take it back to Plato, there's an answer here, and I think I can explain this. So, pretty much, Jamie, you're more expert than me, but Plato is an idealist. So, his view of the forms, his view of how society be structured, wasn't evidence-based. Just through his observations, can't observe the forms in heaven. That's just an idea, isn't it? Aristotle was the man who, right, I'm going to go out to the shoreline and measure the cut of fish, cut it open, see where the lungs are. He was the first scientist. So immediately, Plato's view of the world was sort of challenged by his people. Okay, your forms and ideas are okay, but we still need to go out and measure things. You see what I mean? So there's that separation straight away. And I think to go back to the cave analogy and probably link with the science, the guy comes out of the cave. I've seen this described before, and he sees the sun coming up. And let's say he's a perfect scientist. Does he immediately decide the sun's going to come up every day? Or does he wait till tomorrow and see if it comes up again? How many days does he wait till it's a fact? Someone could go, well, the first 365 days is just a fluke. Maybe tomorrow it won't be. So it's this ever sliding sort of scale of evidence, isn't it? But what I would say, though, and I think how the Republic's wrote in that, it's a conversation, isn't it? It's given examples. It's a sort of dialogue. Yeah, is that right? It's those critical thinking skills. Those critical thinking skills are there for your people asking you that question. Your response could be, yeah, he's done one study, whether it's reproducible or not, whether it's a good study or not, it's a little bit up the rung, or there might be loads of stuff. But that's different to the flat earther guy who doesn't have any critical thinking skills, because it's a train track thinking, isn't it? It's A, I'm going to B, there's no turns, I'm going straight there. The critical person that played Aristotle, it's through discussion, it's through debate. So it's constant weighing up of factors, isn't it? And Plato's warning is that only a few people can escape the cave. Not everyone can. That's why the philosophers have to be in charge, isn't it? So it's a bit of a pessimistic view who can escape sort of.
Yeah, he was quite a pessimistic man, I think, in some of his writings. But I think it leads to another philosopher. I don't know this guy for quite a bit, but that's kind of what Karl Popper was saying. He was saying about that, you've got, unless you have that creative thinking, and you can make that leap between that dogmatic thinking. So he argued that, like I said, people who followed Marxism, and even Marx himself and Engels, had this kind of dogmatic thinking, no, I'm right, and any challenge with that, you would make it fit your argument. And they believed, again, historicists, that society was devolving to such a state. Marx said it was so Plato said it was devolving and degrading, where Marx said it was actually developing into this massive communist state. But what Popper was saying about Karl Marx is that his philosophy was very closed. It didn't accept challenge. So it was a case, I'm right, I'm going to try and prove I'm right. He talks about Einstein, who said, I think I'm right. I'm going to try, what you said, George, before. I'm going to try and prove it wrong. And that's what Einstein, he tried to prove his theories wrong, where the likes of Karl Marx tried to prove them right. So that was different. So you had dogmatic thinking, against critical thinking. And I think that's the direction we go down, isn't it? Is that critical thinking, and that's all you can do is kind of weigh up the evidence that's in front of you, can't you?
I think you can, and I think we're right to pick up on critical thinking. It's where it obviously takes us, and I think that's what's devoid at the moment in some of the kind of the kind of political shenanigans that are going on now, and we have people like Trump. I'm not sure Johnson's as bad as this, but Trump certainly is. The proof is that I'm telling you it. That's his proof, isn't it? And he doesn't see any reason why you need to kind of give any more than that. And I think going back to kind of flat Earth, round Earth kind of argument, one of the problems there is that lack of critical thinking from people like that. And I think one of the issues is that I think we do this. We're all guilty of this because of how much we're online and in social media. We live in this echo chamber idea. We tend to be friends largely with people who are similar to us, so we just hear our own views returned to us, and so do the flat earthers. So they don't need any proof, because the proof is that all their mates are saying all the same things. So they're quite happy to stay in the cave. And then when somebody who's been outside and seen the sun comes back in, it's like, well, it can't be true because all my mates are telling me that it's not true. All my mates are telling me this is how it is. And I think that's the position. I think that's, as a society now, that's kind of broadly the position that we've got into, that as long as I'm comfortable with it, and enough of my friends are comfortable with it, and I'm hearing it all the time, I don't have to worry about the alternative view. I don't have to try and find some common ground. I don't have to listen to the guy who's seen the sun, because we know how this works, because we're all seeing the way it is. And I think that's a real problem that we've got in society these days. And then I don't know whether you've seen The Social Dilemma, the Netflix thing. Then we've got likes of Facebook and Twitter refeeding us all of this stuff again. So it looks like they're selecting the stuff that we see. So how can people ever get to this philosophical thinking point where they're actually critical thinking and weighing up things, when they know, because it's all they see day in, day out, that they've already found the answer? They don't need to think about it. I think that's the problem.
And the other line of it never leads you to extreme positions, doesn't it? That's the issue.
Yeah.
Either the Earth has to be flat or round, the virus has to be fake, racism's real or it doesn't exist. The reasonable person, it typically is, it's what Jim was saying, it's how do we know better? It's a real dilemma. I just feel the reasonable person is going to be something in the middle, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But I think if you just go back to the cave, I think the link between social work intervention or training the student that maybe he's got a lot more ready to practice, and you don't think, it's that dazzling sunlight to realise, well, yeah, my parents been terrible for 5 years and I've really damaged my family, or I'm not ready to be a social worker yet, I've got a lot of work to do. That's a frightening, startling. So one party is probably protecting against that realisation, isn't it? And I think the job that we have is to be gentle. It's similar to Flat Earther. You'll never win an argument with a Flat Earther, probably at all, but by saying you're wrong, you're an idiot. Because then they'll just ramp it up their side, just putting coal in the fire, just getting it hotter. Say, well, what led you to think like this? And have you ever time where you've ever questioned it, or how much reading have you done about these things? Just passive questions might get you a little bit further. I don't know if it would, but it'd be something.
To bring it back to ancient Greece and use a Socratic argument, what Socrates would do and say, well, oh yeah, it's flat, all right, okay, tell us about that, and we'll have a conversation about that. And if you watch some of the dialogues that Plato wrote about, because Socrates didn't write anything down, Plato did. And that's how he described Socrates, and he would have that kind of conversation with somebody. Maybe he would initially agree with somebody, and he would pretend he didn't know nothing on the subject, Socrates, and then he would say, all right, and they would have a conversation. And you would see some of the dialogues when you're reading them, they're really, really good and they're easy to read, where Socrates kind of turns some of his argument round very, very quickly to suit the way he thinks it should go, quite unbeknown to the person who was We should start the conversation off. But going back to your point, George, about extremes, is that we should be avoiding extremes, and I think should we? Because I think it's extremes thinking which has probably led us to some of the better parts of society and the worst parts of society. So if you think about in ancient Greece, slavery was prevalent in those times, and even kind of Plato would never ever discouraged it in none of his writings. So there would have been somebody around then saying slavery is wrong. So that would be an extreme view. So yeah, so is I think we need to keep our minds open enough to think that do we sometimes need an extreme view to challenge something, or are we so confident and comfortable with society as it is? I don't think we should be. I think we're living in the most unbalanced, part of economically in the world than it's ever been. So I think sometimes we may need. I'm not saying we need extreme solutions, but we'll have so much poverty in the world. People are starving to death, and the other side of the world, people are living in mansions. And is that any different to in comparison to ancient Greece when slavery was acceptable? And somebody must have said at one point, this is not right, and would have been classed as an extremist. So now, so should we say somebody's an extremist? Now we turn around and say capitalism or profit or whatever you want to say is wrong, or socialism or communism or totalitarianism is wrong. So yeah, I don't think we should be shying away from extreme views. I think the important part of them is I think we should be discussing them and debating them, and rather than kind of shying away from them. And I think that's probably the role, maybe not of a social course, maybe but of universities and academia, is kind of look at these topics and think, let's discuss it, let's critically analyse something and come up with hopefully with a solution. Because what we would like to think is we in the Western world are right. I sometimes don't think we are. I think that needs challenging. That went a bit deep, didn't it?
Absolutely. We've all gone very quiet. It's very reverent of the conversation there. I think one of the problems is that people have extreme views based on them having very little knowledge of why they've arrived at that extreme view. That's the problem these days, I think. Who's the guy on who's the radio DJ, the talk radio fella, London something or other, who challenges people? And I remember listening to him around the Brexit time. Somebody came on and said it's all this idea of socialism is ridiculous. So he was kind of saying, well, tell me what socialism is, and this guy couldn't tell him. He was against it. He was against this idea. He was against this concept. He had no idea what it was, and I think I'm not sure I could have done a better job, to be fair, but that's where we're at now. People have got extreme views without being willing to examine them. Back to the apples, without being willing to examine them or be moved from that position. And it's interesting. It's interesting you say that the role of university maybe should be to remove these extreme views from the barrel and have a good examine of them. But I think in reality, universities are terrified to do that in case the presentation of such views and the exploration of them is viewed negatively, and therefore it affects them as a business. And I think that's one of the problems. I don't think universities fulfill a role now that they used to fulfill. I don't know, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever. I think that's a problem.
Students are consumers now, when they can demand what's being taught.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at extreme views that we think may be positive, is Greta Thunberg. Is it Greta Thunberg her name?
Yeah.
The young woman who kind of is quite a strong activist for the world and for Greenpeace and for cleaner living. So a lot of people would see her as quite an activist and have extreme views. Some people will think, including myself, thinking, actually, she's a champion. Get somebody out there who's championing for a good cause, because we can see the devastation. But there's a big, huge part of the population which see her as an extremist. Mm-hmm. And those, I suppose, if you go back in recent history, those people who kind of fought for republicanism in Ireland, not not condoning any violence. I'm not talking about the army or the IRA or anything like that. But those people who fought for it politically were seen as extremists, and I think there's a general view now is that the way the Irish Republicans were threat was really, really bad. At the time, those people were seen as extremists. So I think sometimes we've got to kind of rear our head up and say, hang on, maybe this is right. And I think as long as you're coming from a human rights standpoint, and you advocate for people's human rights, I think that's your litmus test, isn't it? Mm. So you apply your critical thinking, apply it based on rights of other people. And that's
the one topical thing, and sort of the other big republic in the world, apart from Plato, is the USA. Obviously, we've got this new judge that they're trying to swear in. Read a little bit about her. She fundamentally believes, and this is sort of a Platonic point, I suppose, that the Constitution of the United States cannot be interpreted. It is a document that was wrote, and that's what we've got to go by. So if it says you've got a right to bear arms, if it says free speech means this, if it says that, the other, who are we to interpret it? You've got to go by it. Now, it's interesting. I like Jamie's perspective. Is that an extreme view? Bit of paper that set this country up is what we'll have to go by. So it'd be like if Plato set up his republic and he said we're going to go by the republic. Well, then can people change that? Well, there's a set of people in America who believe no, that's what we signed up to. That's what this flag means. And there's a sense to that. So in a way, I would separate out these extreme views between the world's flat or the cave drawings are real versus this is our country. This is the original bit of paper. We've all signed up to that. There's a slight difference in logic. Do you see what I mean, Jamie? And I think the person that's a slave to think, well, we're all equal. Again, it's not an absurd position. See what I mean? It is extreme because it's against the status quo, but there's a logic to it.
Mm. Yeah.
Do you think there's a meaningful separation there or not? So again, I'm a good parent because my children have all got their heads on them, or I'm sane because I've managed so far. And who are you, Mr. Mental Health Worker at Section Me? I've lived on this planet for 40 years, so have you. There is a bit of sense to that, isn't there?
Mm. There is. It's where do you go with it, isn't it? Again, going back that closed and open thinking, isn't it? So it's a bit close thinking. Oh well, the law says this that. This Constitution says that. All this evidence is stacked, and I'm saying this is wrong. But no, we're close. We're not even thinking about that. When you think about taking guns away because this bit of paper says we should keep guns. All the evidence you just eradicate critical thinking completely. Just doesn't happen because it's closed society which is saying we're protecting our values in this society because these are so important that we're going to eradicate critical thinking as a result. And I think that's the danger. I think that's what that's what he calls what he's the open state and its enemies, open society and its enemies, I think it's called. And that's what he's saying. He says that you've got a close. He wrote this at the time of the Second World War, and he was witnessing the rise of communism in Russia and the Nazism. And there was a big conflict between. And what he was saying was interesting in his book because he was saying that at the time, and he was from Austria, so he was right in the bang in the middle of it. He was saying there was a massive rise towards the Nazis. The world really valued what the Nazis were standing for, and there was a lot of support for them. And he was saying there was only Winston Churchill in Great Britain that was really, really challenging and being open about it. So not ever support Winston Churchill that much, to be fair. But yeah, he was the one that was seeing what was happening and he made a stand against it. So I think the point being is that closed society is really dangerous, and we need to have that level of critical thinking outside of that to see the harm. So we might reach a stage now where we might think the monarchy, the argument could be, how can we have an equal society when some people are born more equal than others? And that's the state of the monarchy, isn't it? So you can take the questions of the finances out of the equation quite easily. However, you can see, well, the prince's children have more rights than my children. How can that be? If we live in an equal society, how can that be right? so good stuff having that. But we have a bit of a closed society, don't we, when it comes to that. That's the thing. We don't challenge that because that's what we're proud of. And is that any different to the Americans and the guns? The argument itself. I mean, I know the outcome is extremely different. I'm not trying to minimise that. But is it any different? So why do societies need to have that? Why do societies need to have this closed bit where they don't really critically analyse it? As a case, we know that's what it is. We're not going to discuss it.
Well, you need the critical analysis and the critical thinking in those closed bits, don't you? But I think the problem with some of those things you say in there, the monarchy is a good example. Is those groups are closed in order to maintain power. So, I don't know whether there's an argument to be made that actually it's kind of the argument about the Conservative Party. People say the government at the minute don't know what they're doing, and other people say actually they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is maintaining a closed system. They are thinking critically about it, but they're thinking about it from a different perspective because they know exactly what they're trying to do at the minute. They know exactly what's going on. They know exactly why they're keeping universities and schools open. They know exactly why they're trying to maintain some sort of semblance of capitalism in the face of this virus. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly why they're doing that. And the reason they keep it closed and the reason they don't want us thinking critically and trying to invade their closed group is because, like I said, they know exactly what they're doing.
So it brings us back to the point, isn't it? So we went down a bit of a rabbit hole and come up with no solutions, haven't we? Because I think we're going down, we're seeing that critical thinking is where we're out and the way into a better society, how we can think. But now we're kind of seeing that actually critical thinking is being used as well. So it doesn't give any kind of solutions out of it, does it? Because if the Conservative government is using critical thinking, I'm sure they are, to continue to do what they're doing, and we use critical thinking and continue we're doing, we're gonna have this complete dichotomy of the way we have been for ever and a day, and there's kind of no way out, and the victim's to get the blue bottle out get the fly at the bottle, isn't it? Is that the philosophy to try and get out of these conundrums?
I suppose to link this together a little bit, in a sense, go back to government and probably, I know okay to keep on about social, isn't it? That's not good. But I don't think people give two hoots about critical thinking. People give two hoots about good execution. So, say the Conservatives, maybe they've got an idea what they're doing, but the execution is poor. So Plato's Republic, some elements might have got introduced, but it would be whether it works or not in a book to whether it works in real life is the question, isn't it? And it's the same. It's like I could write a really good essay, or I could do a really good risk assessment, but what is the practice that's linked to that to enter the real world, to coming out the cave? So you can have all the ideas about the things, but until you look at the sun and do it, and I think that going back to extremists, I think without the thinking, you've got to have the critical thinking skills, but then the practical bit. If you just have one without the other, I think you're lost.
No, okay.
Which is really hard, but I don't think it's a point made. I mean, I'll just reinforce my political point. If I could ask politicians questions, a lot of it would be less about the politics, more about the execution of something. So, okay, you believe this, prison reform or benefits or whatever. Well, what is your record at actually achieving that? Rather than disagreeing with the point, it's more how it was achieved or implemented. And I wonder how much of politics is really that, but that's hardly ever discussed. It's a bit like if you're a social work manager, bit you see is the essay, the type bit. The time seeing the person talking or doing any intervention is almost minimal.
And I used to always say this when I was a social worker, being dyslexic and having problems with paperwork, I used to get it done. But I certainly wasn't understanding the actual practice where it was. I was really proud of my practice work. I was really proud of some of the outcomes that I achieved, and I'm still very proud of that. But I was judged on my paperwork, and I was very, very frustrating. I think, yeah, but at the time, I was like keeping loads of people okay, and keeping supporting the community and doing what I should have been doing. As we jumped into other social work as successful as me, but I wrote fantastic reports, and the manager didn't get on the back, but because you got some spelling and grammatical errors, you judge on that because that's what they see. They don't see that. And that's what the performance data is on, really, isn't it? It's that the performance data is on how much you actually churn out as in paperwork, not as in outcomes you have to people's lives. So I think you got a good point there, George.
Because the biggest thing, sorry, Stephen, your turn to talk, but we are trapped in the system. It's interesting. Someone contacted our team to do a bit of research on how to connect care arrangements last through time. So what happens in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, with a 2-year-old that's cared for by the grandparents? What are the outcomes? This researcher from, might be Sheffield Hallam, maybe, I don't know, I'm not naming names. Their entire basis for judging a good outcome is whether it's re-referred back to social care. And I was like, oh my God, it's like, it's just a terrible yardstick. Is that it? The thing we've got in our own system tells you whether it's been a success or not. It's exactly Jamie's point. You've done a good job with that one person if your assessment is praised by a manager and nothing else matters. It's ridiculous, really.
I mean, I think you're right. Just to take this into social work education, it's that thing that we know, is that it's that tension between the university book learning and the practice, isn't it? It's the tension that's between that and how we kind of meld those two things together. And they're on placement. Students are on placement longer than they're sat in a classroom, and I think that's only right, because taking your point about practice, I think that's right. I think there's only so much you can teach people before they have to go and try it out in the reality of practice. And actually, I'd argue that there are some things we simply can't teach people. There are some things that certain types of people who can already do certain types of things, all right, we can shape it and hone it a bit and improve it a bit, by giving them practice at it. But there are some things we can't teach people, and we've got that whole thing, which is something that often gets pondered, is who ultimately makes the best social workers. And it isn't necessarily the people that come out with firsts. It could be the people that come out with thirds, because it's what they do that's kind of more important than the quality of kind of the written work, the academic work, if you like. Important in some ways as that is. It is in that face-to-face nature of practice where people are going to demonstrate their quality, by
the critical theories and legislation to the actual situation in hand, isn't it? So that's what good social work is. And when I say critical theories, I'm talking about your own skills as well, all that kind of communication skills. And the granddaddy them all, Mr. Carl Rogers, still enjoy that man.
Excellent.
Oh, wow.
Should we summarize in some way? Didn't we decide we were going to do a takeaway each? I'm not sure I can pull a takeaway out of the complexity of this discussion that we just had.
Didn't it? We're very deep. Plato takes it in a fascinating man. Takes it in so many different directions. He's very, very clever in his little story of the cave, but I think it resonates so much with today.
Yeah.
Is that I think a lot of Plato's writing, I think, was very, very astute. I don't agree with most of what he wrote. I think if you followed his writing, I think you would. Pardon me. It would lead you down to a very much a totalitarian state.
Totalitarian.
Yeah, totalitarian state. As I think he generally believes. I think that's probably the arrogance of his brilliant mind, I think. But yeah, I think he did raise a lot of questions on democracy, and I think that there's kind of some debates that we'll probably have in the future. Unchecked democracy, was it used to? I was having a conversation with. He turned on and says, if we have pure democracy in its purest form, we would have likes of ports That was exactly what poets would be dictating social policy. And you think, yeah, should just replace poets with somebody from celebrity or what was Donald Trump famous for? What was his television program?
Apprentice.
Yeah. So you'd have so replace the word poet with a modern day equivalent. Take modern policy, and that's the world we're in.
Yeah, well, absolutely, of course it is. Yeah,
He was right.
I think my takeaway would be the thing that I often say to students when they arrive is while I'm interested in turning out a social worker, I'm actually more interested in turning out a person who can think for themselves and challenge their own thinking. So don't just take what you believe and understand to be true as necessarily true. Be a thinker, be a critical thinker about what you perceive as reality and what other people tell you are their realities. Be critical about that. Think it through. And actually, if you can be a skillful thinker, you'll be a skillful at anything. Would be what I would kind of say. Yeah.
Well, even a skillful footballer.
Why?
I've always dreamed of being that, but no, I've been any good at it.
I think it would be anything you wanted to be, Jamie Scott.
George, what's your takeaway point?
I think my takeaway, probably just piggyback on yours too. I think if you think of the social work student, I think they've got to be prepared for the journey out of the cave into the sunlight and finding out about the world with fresh eyes. I think there's got to be some movement and thought and exploration. And equally, they've got to be prepared to be the person to say, by the way, you're not a very good parent, this isn't working out very well, or not in those words, I'm just some paraphrase, or I'm actually pretty worried about your mental health, or I'm worried about how you're looking after yourself. And to get that response, that sort of, what the hell are you talking about? No way. That sort of the chain to their concept of their own reality. How dearly would you hold on to that as a person? You're just someone that's escaped, pissed off, you've left the team, haven't you, really? Why they can listen to you? So I think that's very analogous of social work. I can really see it. And I think particularly the social work student.
There you go. Well done,
Cue the music.
Hmm?
Cue the music at that point.